2023 was one of the very best and most eventful seasons in tennis in recent years. Left with a nostalgic feeling, we decided to do something different. A recap of the year, pulling back the curtain on our Tennis Plus awards, and something very thoughtful for you guys. In January, the first edition of the United Cup, a brand new tournament that featured mixed-gender team tennis, was unveiled, and the United States won the tournament after beating Italy in the final. What followed was an epic final in Adelaide where Novak Djokovic saved match points to beat Sebi Korda in one of the best three-setters of early 2023. Talon Griekspoor then won his maiden ATP Tour singles title in Pune, India, while Richard Gasquet would win the Auckland Open and become the #1 French player. Of course, we all remember how the month ended, with Nole winning a record-extending 10th Australian Open in sensational fashion, despite nursing a hamstring injury as he returned to the world #1 position. Unfortunately, Rafael Nadal's injury would rule him out for the entire season. February came and we saw a couple of ATP 250 winners: Sebastian Baez in Cordoba, Jannik Sinner in Montpellier, and Wu Yibing in Dallas. After a terrible start to the year, Daniil Medvedev would then kickstart an incredible run, winning the first of a couple titles in Rotterdam. Meanwhile, Carlos Alcaraz would mark his return from injury and start the season with a title win in Buenos Aires. Unfortunately, he would lose out to Cameron Norrie in the finals of the 500 event in Rio de Janeiro the following week. Daniil Medvedev would then win titles in Doha and Dubai, where he ended Djokovic's undefeated start to the season. Taylor Fritz wins a title in Delray Beach, and Hubie Hurkacz wins one in France. Meanwhile, Alex de Minaur would also beat Tommy Paul to win the title in Acapulco. We couldn't have asked for a better start to the year. It was all about Indian Wells and Miami in March. Novak missed out on both and wasn't allowed into the United States. Thankfully, we witnessed an epic Alcaraz-Sinner fixture in both tournaments as they shared the spoils 1-1. Alcaraz won Indian Wells after beating Daniil in the final, while Daniil won Miami after taking down Jannik Sinner in straight sets. Not a bad month at all. In April, we witnessed a rather strange European clay court swing. Oh, Frances Tiafoe won a clay event held in Houston at the beginning of the month. Casper Ruud won the title in Estoril, but one of the biggest stories of the month was seeing Andrei Rublev finally win his first Masters 1000 tournament in Monte Carlo against a solid player in Holger Rune. No surprises here seeing Carlos Alcaraz up his game in Barcelona and Madrid, because it's literally what he did the year before. For Nole, it was probably his worst month on the tour as he had to deal with an elbow injury and early defeats at the Monte Carlo Masters and the Banja Luka Open. But if you thought April was an interesting month, I wonder how you might have felt seeing the rise of Klayvedev in Rome. Honestly, seeing Medi play so well at the Italian Open, winning the tournament on a surface he hated, couldn't have been more ironic. Later that month, Arthur Fils would secure his maiden ATP title win in Lyon, defeating Francisco Cerundolo in the final. The French Open came, and we were all going berserk with the predictions. Many experts counted Djokovic out because of his injury and poor form, and Alcaraz was considered the favorite. In the end, Carlitos cramped against the Joker, who went on to secure a historic 23rd major and triple career slam after defeating Casper Ruud in straight sets in the final in early June. It was Ruud's third Grand Slam final in 12 months. Nothing too shabby. The remainder of June was rather quiet, although Tiafoe won Stuttgart while Griekspoor won another title in the Netherlands. A couple of surprising wins followed: Sasha Bublik at the Halle Open, Alcaraz at the Queen's Club Championships, which was his first grass court tournament win. If only we knew what was coming. Anyway, Chris Eubanks then wins his first title at the Mallorca Open and then goes on to make a crazy run at Wimbledon, but not before Francisco Cerundolo wins in Eastbourne. At this point, we're midway through the year, and it just puts into perspective how long the tennis season really is. The second half of the season begins with what's literally the biggest tournament in the sport, Wimbledon. Jannik Sinner makes his first ever semifinal appearance at a Grand Slam, and things are starting to look up. Meanwhile, Alcaraz takes out big names like Holger Rune and Daniil Medvedev to set up a rematch with Djokovic in the final. And I'm sure we all remember how that played out. Djokovic whiskers away from a 2-0 lead, makes some rare mistakes, and Alcaraz just leveled up. The match eventually goes the distance, and Alcaraz comes out on top in what was one of the biggest upsets in the sport in recent years. Djokovic sees his calendar Grand Slam hopes ruined once again. We then go to Newport, where Adrian Manarino wins the tournament. Back on the clay courts, Rublev wins in Bastad and Pedro Cachin wins in Stade. Alexander Zverev wins the Hamburg 500 title, his biggest title since coming back from injury. Fritz wins in Atlanta, Alexei Popyrin in Umag, Dan Evans in Washington, and Stefanos Tsitsipas wins his only title of the year in Los Cabos, beating Alex de Minaur in the final. Baez gets another title under his belt in Austria. August wasn't really as busy as July, but we still enjoyed plenty of action. Jannik Sinner finally got his first Masters 1000 win in his third attempt after he beat Alex de Minaur in the final at the Canadian Open. Alcaraz isn't firing on all cylinders, but manages to make it to the final in Cincinnati to set up yet another rematch against Novak. Novak saves championship point to beat Alcaraz in an epic three-setter in what was one of the best matches of the year. Baez wins yet another title in the United States, and the US Open gets underway. Medi becomes the party spoiler after beating Carlitos in the semifinal at the US Open. Meanwhile, Ben Shelton makes a deep run to the semis, hanging up on everyone before getting schooled by Novak. Djokovic wins the US Open and gets his 24th slam. The group stage at the Davis Cup continues, and Team World gets the W over Team Europe at the Laver Cup. We go over to Asia, and Sasha Zverev wins in Chengdu, Karen Khachanov wins in Zhuhai. Jannik Sinner gets his first win over Daniil Medvedev as he wins the title in Beijing. The Sinner engine is up and running at this point. Meanwhile, Adrian Mannarino continues winning titles low-key as he gets another one in Astana. It's October, and Hurkacz decides that it's time to make his move in the ATP Finals race. He wins the Shanghai Masters, beating Andrei Rublev in the final. Ben Shelton then backs up the hype with a first ATP title win at the Japan Open, a 500-level event. Sasha Bublik rules in Antwerp, and Gael Monfils wins in Stockholm. We're heading into the final weeks of the year. FAA defends his title in Basel, beating Hubi in the final. Medi isn't able to defend his title in Vienna as Sinner gets another win over the Russian. Alcaraz makes one final push for year-end #1, but gets dumped by Roman Safiullin in the first round of the Paris Masters. Dimitrov, meanwhile, makes a sensational run to the final, but can't get past Nole, who beats him in straight sets to win his 7th Paris Masters title. Heading into November, Ugo Humbert wins in Metz, while Adrian Mannarino wins in Sofia. Next, we have the ATP Finals. I made a video about the entire tournament and everything that happened. Check it out if you haven't seen it already. It's one of the best tournaments all year. Novak barely makes it past the group stage and doesn't win any match in straight sets. Sinner gives a helping hand by going all out against Rune. Tsitsipas withdraws, and Hurkacz makes a cameo. In the other group, Alcaraz gets off to a poor start, but shows everyone that he isn't the worst player on indoor hard courts. Rublev is nowhere near his best and loses all 3 of his matches. Medi goes through, but Zverev doesn't, despite winning 2 out of 3 of his group stage matches. We have an Alcaraz-Nole rematch in the semis, but it's kind of anticlimactic. Sinner takes out Medi for a 3rd consecutive time, but loses to Djokovic in the final as the Serb reminds everyone that he's still the king. However, Sinner gets his revenge as he saves 3 match points to beat Djokovic in the Davis Cup. Sinner's Italy lifts the trophy for the first time in 47 years after beating Australia in the final. Hamad Medjedovic then wins the ATP Next Gen, announcing himself as next in line for something big in 2024. So at this point, let me ask you guys, what were your biggest takeaways from the ATP Tour this year? Having had a quick recap of the year, we got something new for you guys. The Tennis Plus Awards, giving our take on the most impressive things we saw throughout the tours. Our ATP Match of the Year goes to Novak and Carlos in Cincinnati because of the nature of their rivalry, the roller coaster nature of the match, the intense playing conditions, and of course, the quality of play. I also have Sinner vs Alcaraz in Miami as another top pick. Then there's Sinner-Nole at the round-robin stage of the ATP Finals. Really, you could count up to 5 matches that deserve this award. For me, it was the ATP Finals. Weird choice, you might be thinking. I considered the fact that there weren't too many boring matches with the very best players constituting the playing field. The crowd, the tournament, the permutations, Sinner's game, everything added up. Honorable mentions to Wimbledon, the US Open, Cincinnati, Monte Carlo. What else do you guys think? Medvedev in Rome has to be the top pick. Almost no one saw it coming.
Medi winning on a slow surface when almost everyone wrote him off was insane.
Of course, we have Carlitos at Wimbledon as a close second, or would you rather have it take up the first spot?
On the women's side, I'll pick Marketa Vondroušova's Wimbledon title win. Word on the street was that she left her fiancé home with their cat because she thought she'd be back in a few days. I'm pretty sure she must have even surprised herself with the result. I also thought Coco Gauff winning the US Open was super impressive. We expected her to go far, but going all the way and coming from a set down against Sabalenka was unbelievable. In fact, the entire summer of Coco Mania was crazy to watch.
When I saw this classic Medvedev dance after he beat Tsitsipas, I was like, what the heck is this guy doing? I thought it was hilarious considering the context in which he did it. I have a couple matches for this one. Alcaraz-Nole at Wimbledon. Alcaraz beat the 4-time defending champion on a surface where he had little experience. Medvedev versus Thiago Seyboth-Wild. Roland Garros first round. Thiago was world number 172 at the time. Unbelievable. Alcaraz versus Fabio Marozsan in Rome. Honestly, I didn't really know about Marozsan up until that point, and if I remember correctly, he was ranked 135 in the world when he beat Alcaraz. That's insane. I thought Ymer's actions in Lyon were quite scary, particularly for the umpire. You could understand his frustration, but such action really wasn't justifiable in any way. He eventually got suspended after missing 3 out-of-competition doping test attempts, and he announced his retirement shortly after. How about this for a serve?
Describe that serve in one word.
Surely one of the worst fails we saw all year. These Sir Shelton. Has to be Shelton on this one. He reached the quarterfinal at the Australian Open, the semis at the US Open, won an ATP 500 title, and broke into the top 15.
On the women's side, we have Mira Andreeva, who only turned 16 in April, breaking into the WTA top 50. She surely has a bright future ahead.
FAA literally disappeared for almost the entire year. Casper Ruud dropped out of the top 10 and had a year to forget. Tsitsipas didn't have a good year either. I think this one, though, goes to FAA because entering into 2023, we thought he was literally going to be among the very best young players. This one is a little obvious. I think Jannik Sinner deserves it. He had lots of top 5 and top 10 wins this season and proved himself against the big guns. All he needs to do now is back his performances up with a really deep run at a Grand Slam. Maybe even make the final or win one.
On the women's side, Coco Gauff is well-deserving because she was a different player in the second half of the season, winning the 3 biggest titles of her career in 500, 1000, and Grand Slam categories. From calling the Paris crowd beautiful after giving them the middle finger and hilarious exchanges with the crowd, we've gotta admit that Daniil is such an interesting character on and off the court. Easy choice. After seeing the shambolic display and poor tournament organization at the WTA Finals in Cancun, we knew immediately that there couldn't be any worse tournament in 2023. Awful timing and location, terrible player management, the courts were a mess, and almost everything about the tournament was cringeworthy. Something crazy happened when Stefanos Tsitsipas played Ben Shelton in Cincinnati. Seeing an old lady actually making bee noises to distract Steph while he was serving was quite hilarious, and at first I didn't quite know what to make of it. Tsitsipas must have thought that it was an actual bee because he then started to swipe his racket around. It was the most bizarre interruption to a match you'll ever see. Unlike what many people expected, Tsitsipas handled the situation pretty well, and I'm sure he won a few fans over with his composure. After she got ratted out, the lady with the childish behavior ended up apologizing, but it didn't change the fact we had just witnessed something really absurd. Also, Alejandro Davidovich Fokina's decision to go for an underarm serve against Holger Rune at such a critical point in their Wimbledon 4th round encounter is something I'll never understand. Nick Kyrgios joining Tennis Channel. Not in a million years would I have ever thought I'd see something like that, but I still found it quite interesting. Novak hanging up the phone on Ben Shelton at the US Open was ice cold and one savage moment that we aren't going to forget in a hurry. I also like the fact that Shelton took the response pretty well all in all. It's crazy to think that all these moments happened in 2023. Not only did many of these stories and characters go viral, they also caused a lot of shakeup within the sport, adding more appeal and color to it. The complexities of the characters of the players on tour and ultimately the randomness of each moment made 2023 a memorable year for superfans like us.
There were several big-time innovators in tennis that made their mark on the sport this year. But one stands out to me, the Drop Shot Tournament Series in Austin, Texas. Drop Shot is led by former Australian Open doubles champion Christo van Rensburg, and they own and operate 2 ITF 25K tournaments. In 2023, they launched the ATX Open, a WTA 250 event. So where am I going with this? Drop Shot isn't just a tournament promoter. Christo and his team are using their platform to create opportunities for new players at the game's highest level. Drop Shot pioneered a program where the winner of their women's ITF event received a wildcard into the ATX Open. And the program worked. Peyton Stearns was ranked 306 in the world when she won the 2022 ITF 25K in Austin. She then took her wildcard and ran with the opportunity. After making a run at the ATX Open earlier this year, Peyton continued her winning ways, ending 2023 ranked 49 in the world. Definitely stay tuned for more from Austin.
Going into 2024, some of the biggest storylines will revolve around Djokovic's quest for a calendar Grand Slam and Olympic gold, Rafa's potential last dance on the tour, Sinner's pressured quest for a maiden slam, the possibility of a third slam in 3 years for Alcaraz, and more points to prove for the likes of Rublev, Tsitsipas, Zverev, and Holger Rune. We might also be wondering what's next for players like Andy Murray, Stan Wawrinka, and even Dominic Thiem. But one thing is for sure, 2024 is going to be another very interesting year.
But this video wouldn't be complete without one final thank you. And this one is the most important of all. It goes out to all of you, the fans. Your views and comments give me energy, and I love nothing more than sharing my passion for tennis and my opinions with all of you. So in the new year, feel free to keep disagreeing with me, or tell me I'm a little bit too much of a Djokovic stan. But in any case, I love and appreciate all of you and look forward to seeing you in the new year.